Hello, everybody. On today's episode, I have on a returning guest who has given me a huge boost. He is a very kind and friendly man. His book is a must read for anyone on the verge of awakening. He is author of the book God, School, 9/11, and JFK. Everybody, welcome Bruce de Torres back to the show. Welcome, Bruce. Thank you for coming back. How are you, my friend?
I'm really good. I'm really excited and always caught by surprise and delighted by your audience clapping there. I love it.
Well, I'm glad, you're in a good mood, you're laughing, you're smiling. That's what it's all about, the applause, because I listen to a lot of podcasts and people, for the most part, they give a nice introduction to everybody. But since I have the audio machine to do it, I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna cheap out on. I'm gonna use it.
It's great.
Yeah. So how are you doing today?
I'm well. I always rally for things like this. It's always an honor to discuss these things with someone like you, Todd. It's important. It's just important. That's all.
It is very important. And you have been hosting some roundtable. Well, one so far, roundtable, and the several more ready to go. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. My publisher, Chris Milligan and Trine Day, created these roundtables once a month, a live, free Zoom event exploring a brand new book called The Valediction by Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould, what they saw and learned and tried to tell America about what was going on in Afghanistan in the early 1980s. It's a fascinating story. And last week or 2 weeks ago, we had the first roundtable. I'm the moderator and try and, you know, keep, give everyone a chance to talk by the end of it. And it's just another glimpse behind the scenes, because the official story of what America was doing in Afghanistan way back in the 70s and 80s is a lie. As Liz, the co-author, says, Charlie Wilson's War is the propaganda story about what, the evil Soviets invading, and they didn't want to leave. They wanted to conquer the country, and we're the good guys. Of course, that's the propaganda story, and this is the antidote to Charlie Wilson's War.
Yeah, well, you do an excellent job moderating too. I mean, you have a lot of people that are talking about the topic who are informed about it, and it's a difficult task to moderate all that. But you did an excellent job, and everybody that talked. I mean, I was floored by so many different people. And I had Paul and Liz on the show, which that show will come out the episode before this one. And man, I gotta tell you, the stuff they were telling me, it all lines up so well with everything else I've been researching, studying, and then how everything works, and just the way that they were involved with the Soviets leaving. They were kind of involved in the brokering, not directly but indirectly, and that's amazing to be able to speak to these people.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
amazing and an honor. And for whatever reason, why ever you or I get excited about the truth or outraged about being lied to, I feel just honored and privileged. And I just, couldn't not, try making big deal about, oh, just the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the truth, and I really can't stand lies any longer. And when someone lies to me, it really, that's the one thing that really gets me going.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's it. It's game over. You can't do anything with that person. Can't
Hmm.
trust them. And without that, you just hope they forget your face and your name and your number. You just want nothing to do with a liar.
Right. And today, in today's day and age, it's so hard for everyone to want to accept their responsibility. A lot of what's going on in the world is everyone's blaming everyone else for their shortcoming. And, to be able to accept that you're responsible for everything that happens to you. And maybe it's not the immediate decision that you made to be in the position you're in at this moment, but there were so many other decisions that have led to this decision that if you had made other decisions at other times, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in. So for someone to understand that they are completely responsible, you reap what you sow, cause and effect, karma, however you want to word it. When you understand, or when anyone understands that this is the complete truth, then you can understand that you have the ability to change every single part of your life.
Amen. Because
Mhm.
it's an old saying that sounds so trite because it's just words, and words are kind of trite, but not to get into that. But with 100% responsibility for everything in our life, everything we ever did, every choice, we were never a victim, comes infinite power to determine what do things mean to me. And that's where it all starts, right here in our skulls. What am I going to make it mean? And that unleashes all the power and all the joy that a human could possibly have. And if that's all foreign and sounds hokey, well, people just have to start experimenting with, well, what did he just say? And what does that mean? And how do I do it? And how do I live it? That's for each of us to figure out. I can't walk anyone through it step by step, A to Z, but it's a goad, right? We want to challenge people, take responsibility, enjoy the power that comes with it.
Right. No, I see a lot of times people post on social media that they're going through something, and they're looking for the answer from someone. They're like, what does this mean? And I'm just like, well, you know what, in a general sense, it could mean this, this, and this, but I'm not you. I haven't lived your life. I can't tell you what the answer is. Only you have the puzzle piece to the puzzle that you're putting together. I can give you a general sense of where to maybe look for the clue, but you really have to examine your own life to find out where, this puzzle piece fits in.
Yes. And anyone doing that or struggling with that or fascinated by that, I highly recommend they find a man named Richard Grannon, Grannon, on YouTube, anywhere on social media, and then his websites and his massive amount of free videos on YouTube and his other coaching, because he comes at life as a coach. He started as a martial arts coach, and then he turned into kind of a psychology coach, centering in the specifics of narcissism and codependence. And what
Mm,
you just described is, if someone's on social media asking, what does this mean? What does that mean? And this is very common, it's ubiquitous, especially in the States. It's a hive mind. Um, it's You're defining codependence, because that means my locus of control is not internal, it's not inside me, I'm not independent, it's outside. And if I make society or authority or the experts or the politicians or quote unquote what everybody does my law or my authority, I am at their mercy. And then I've got someone to blame. And we get trained in that from day one through school. And that's a big teaching right there, how our habits are set and when are they set by. And if they are set by 7 years old, like a lot of research is indicating in the last 10, 20, 30 years, between the neurology and brain science and psychology, no wonder they capture kids. They want kids younger and younger and younger, because if you can get kids in a habit by the time they're 7, there's even an old philosopher, I forget which one, said, give me the boy till he's 7 and I'll give you the man. That's it.
mhm.
So all these
Um,
wonderful things.
well, that goes right into Mimi and I. We had Ryan Zem on. He was 2 of my last 3 episodes, and everything he was saying to me was blowing my mind left and right. And then we ended up talking for another 2.5 hours after our 2.5 hour conversation for the second one. And I wish we would have been able to record it. We didn't, because it was just talking back and forth, but he was telling us that at 6 or 7, the pineal gland starts to calcify. Just
Mm.
naturally, it starts to close off. And we were reading in the Bible where Jesus says, uh, you know, only he or however it's worded,
If the
only
eye is single,
well, no, he was saying only they can return to heaven once they become like children, something to that effect. And he was saying, oh, I think it has to do with the pineal gland having to reopen it. And with you, what you're saying at 7, all these researchers are saying, uh, what you were just talking about. It kind of seems like they get to us at that early age in order to pull us here. And I always said that. A lot of people say that they incarnated in this life, in order to make this a better place. And it's very possible. But it's funny how it works because in order to communicate with the beings in this place, you have to be indoctrinated. These beings that we could speak a completely different language than everything else. So the angels and babies understand each other, animals and trees understand each other, but humans don't. And because in order to communicate with the humans, start you have to stop being able to communicate to everything else. We get to this point where it's like one or the other. You can't really do both.
yeah. And my favorite idea, which I do explore a little bit in my book, is that, well, everything is and is made of the intention to exist.
Hmm.
But specifically for humans, I love to imagine, it gives me great power to imagine that you and I and we became human beings consciously. If we are eternal spirits, we know, and as that, it's completely different. What being a human is completely different to the real us. If that's the 99.9% infinite, the rest of us, that part of us knows. That's infinite knowledge. It knows when you become a human, you're first going to alienate yourself from reality. Okay. And you're going to, by the time you're 7, you're going to perceive yourself as one lost among others who's got to fight and compete in order to survive. And every other life form is an angel that's here to inspire you to pay attention until you realize, oh, everything's made out of love. Everything's made out of loving kindness. Everything is imbued with that spirit of loving kindness, the real stuff that we really, really are. And this is an intense game or adventure. Those are the words. That's how I choose to look at it in order
Hmm.
to embrace it, in order to have
Choose your
fun
own
with it.
adventure.
And
Choose
yeah,
your own
and
adventure video game.
well, I've never played those kind of things, so I don't know. I'm a 20th century man. That analogy doesn't mean anything to me. But
Yeah.
it's I guess it's the exact. I know it's the exact same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like when you come up to you come up to a fork in the road basically, and then like up will pop a message like you can go this way and you will do this, or you can go this way and you will do this. Or kind of like those books where it says
Mhm.
turn to page 72 if you want to ride the rocket, or turn to page 104 if you want to sail the ocean blue. It's a whole choose your own adventure type of thing. Uh,
I love
but
it.
but you were just saying there about the earth being loving kindness. It's funny, or not the earth, but everything around us that connects everything, loving kindness. It is that exactly, and science calls it dark matter. Now, why would that be? Maybe because they don't feel love and they think that they're not loved and that this place is just random. Does one lead to the other? Them calling it dark matter, us calling it love, them being atheists, us being godly people. Are these things connected, or am I just making things up here?
No, no, no. That's very. It's very logical to parse.
Hmm.
But as a much older man who has really studied A Course in Miracles, not more than most, but I did every page of it. The book that Marianne Williamson has been teaching for 45 years. I'm going to take you with me now all the way into the end zone. Whoever they is that doesn't feel love and they call it dark matter, according to the Course in Miracles and my favorite ideas, that's all wrong because there is no other. The only one who could think oh, there's something scary, or there's dark matter, or I don't love myself, so I've got to hurt others, is us. It's me. It's you. Because the Course of Miracles says all suffering is the result of feeling separate from reality,
Mm,
which is our true self, which is love. A Course in Miracles says only love is real. And we can substitute consciousness. Only consciousness is real. There's just one thing that exists, loving consciousness, as Ram Dass called it, or whatever. So it's part of the illusion of the game you decided to play as eternal spirit, to perceive a guy named Bruce who's talking with his fingers in the air, or those evil scientists who are doing this, that, the other thing, until you, me, practice thinking there's only love here. And if I can remember that, you can interpret these dark energy scientists in a new way if we constantly take 100% responsibility that, well, the only one who's got an evil intent on planet Earth is me, if I think it's real, as opposed to it's either an entertainment, or these others they've made a mistake, because other people are real. I just contend that they're an illusion, they're a projection. There's something I'm creating, or I planned to encounter, to challenge myself to love even what looks unlovable. Hitler and the Nazis and what they did in the concentration camps. I've got to somehow, I'm challenged. Like, how do I think about that in a way that I can give love, send love? My intention for the people who did that is love. That's the end zone that I'm constantly that I try to explain a little bit in my book. And it's the best advice I could give to anybody, myself, especially myself, to remind myself that.
yeah, it is the best advice you could give to someone is to be all loving and non-judgmental. And it is really, that's the essence of Jesus's message. And a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, some people are talking now, I've been hearing lately, that Jesus came, his tongue was a sword and he was here to end the evil, which is true. But to us, but since, we are who we are, if we can just be the message that he was giving us, if he was here to do his job, that doesn't mean we're supposed to do his job, but his message was be all loving and non-judgmental. And that's what we're supposed to be. And if we can be that, if I can, if we can heal those who are hurt, then they will stop hurting others, and then they will stop being hurt by others, and we will end the karmic cycle. War only begets more war, hate only begets more hate, violence only begets more violence. So there has to come a point in time where somebody is the quote unquote bigger man or bigger woman, whatever, and they have to end the immaturity of fighting. It has to come to a certain point. Someone has to do it.
Right, right. And if that's a nice interpretation of all that is in the Bible about what Jesus said or what he intended, wonderful. If that's what's in the books that didn't make it into the official Bible, the other gospels that are out there, lovely. It's a nice summary of what Gandhi tried to say too. We have to be the change we want to see in the world. And it's very consistent with, again, the Course in Miracles, that it's not that we're supposed to be, all just loving and accepting, but it's to recognize that if there is only one, and we're a part of it, that certainly influences how we make ourselves feel. It's a lot to wrap a head around. But it's the wisdom of the best poetry, the ancient Zen and Eastern mysticism, and all those traditions, and all that Zen Buddhist stuff about, and even the best Beatle lyrics, I am he as you are me, and you are whatever, and we are all together. There really is, and that's a great solace to justify pushing through year after year of a human life where it really looks like we're at each other's throats, and we're making every day less and less healthy. So to bring it to some, nuts and bolts and tangible stuff, I just say folks have to spend some time every day thinking about these kind of things, and then returning to the activities of job and groceries and laundry and things like that.
Yeah, and that brings me to, where we're at today and in society. And it's there's this craziness, but the people that I associate with, and myself included, I'm not wrapped up in the news and what's going on. I'm not wrapped up in worrying about who's getting what put in their body, who's wearing what on their face. I'm not wrapped up in any of that, even and some of it that some of the stuff that I hear that is being mandated, across certain states and all. I mean, it is a very unpleasant thought. It is a very awful thing that is being done in some places, quite frankly. But if I wrap myself up in that, and I get caught up in that, and then I'm lowering my vibration, and what that does is then I'm more vulnerable to lower other people's vibrations around me, and I'm more likely to be in an argument with someone. I'm more likely to not receive the message in a positive, loving way when I get wrapped up in that. So, especially with what's going on, it's craziness. No matter what it is, people can call it end times. People can call it, just a run of the mill day. Whatever it is right now, it's there is things that are going on that are trying to make it uh, difficult for people to live, and the best way to avoid all of this is to just worry about healing yourself and what you can take care of yourself. I can't clean
Mhm.
up all the trash in the world, all the litter, but I can take care of the litter that I see, and I can make sure my trash makes it into a trash can. That's what I can do.
Absolutely. There, it's like make your own bed. There's a
Hmm.
Zen thing. The student goes to the master. What's wisdom? And the master says something like, "Did you just eat?" "Yes, master." "Wash your bowl." See attention to the little things, like making sure our trash gets into the garbage. And then you're right. Everything's got a huge ripple effect because quantum physics implies, if not has proved, everything's connected to everything.
Hmm.
And it's fun. These ideas are fun, and that's not a bad thing to cultivate. And then they're also life-giving, and they're also, they and you're right about taking responsibility and paying attention to your own energy level and keeping it at least relaxed. We don't have
Hmm.
to be ecstatic and dancing, although I like when that happens too. But at
Hmm.
least, hey man, everything's okay right here, right now. Most of the time, everything's okay. And you're right about, careful what you buy into. The fears that they're selling us, fire hosing us, in the media.
Right. And the people that are going through these things, I think that there are some people who are going to say, it's completely fake. No one's actually going through it. But I think there are people actually going through it, but that it is to serve them, to to strengthen them in one way or another. We all go through our trials and tribulations in whatever form that may present itself. Say it be a debilitating injury from a young age, or a disease, or a traumatic event of some significance will occur to everybody that lives. And the way that we get out of that, and the way we break the karmic cycle, is to accept that it happened and move on from it, is to address it. And okay, instead of dwelling on what's happened, quote unquote, to me, and how can I use this now for me? How is this going
Mm.
to benefit me in the future? What can I do to get myself out of the situation rather than harp on the situation? And a lot of people want to just bitch and complain about the situation they're in instead of just changing it. Because, as you said, we are these powerful beings. And since we are completely responsible for what happens to us, then we can change the trajectory. Maybe not every single detail we're not responsible for, but in a general sense, we are responsible for what happens to us, and the way that we better what happens to us is by perceiving that what's happening to us isn't all that bad. And then because once we give this super negative reaction, then the universe is like, "Oh, they like that. Let's give them more because they're reacting to it." It's that algorithm, like Facebook doesn't know if you hit when you hit the like button, it doesn't know if it's an angry face or a loving heart. It just knows that you hit the button. So it's like, "Oh, okay, let's give them more of that." That's what the universe does to us. So when we react super negative, super positive, it doesn't matter. It's going to give us more of that. So when we have something super negative happen to us, don't react and it won't come back to you or,
Mhm.
in some way.
No, that sounds like what a lot of these, masters and gurus and success coaches and life coaches say. And I buy into it because I've I've practiced it just the way that you described. Whatever we give attention to, we are watering, we are strengthening, we're giving life, we're giving energy. That's what attention is. And to know that can wake someone up to realize, oh, okay, I keep hating what so and so did last year because, well, now I've got the habit of thinking about it. And like a muscle, the more you do anything, the more you think about it, the more you think about it. So, yeah, mind is a wonderful thing to grab the steering wheel of. And we've
Yeah.
got to make our mind our slave instead of letting it make us its slave.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that leads me right into, I want to show your book here. God School 9/11 and JFK. And there's a chapter about COVID-19, chapter about a brief history of America. And there is a bit in there about RFK, which was very interesting because I didn't know it to the detail that you provided for me. That was a lot of new information to me. And just anybody listening, if there's somebody that that is on the verge, give them this book because it really breaks down. It gets you to, it talks about God at first and existence and how we're here, and then it gets you to remember you were indoctrinated in school. So we got to think bigger now. And then it goes to the biggest two conspiracies, 9/11 and JFK, and it's just the way it's written is beautiful. So what I was getting to with the RFK stuff now, the whole Sirhan thing being hypnotized, that was news to me. That was very interesting.
Yeah, the poor guy, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
no, go ahead.
no, there's a lot of books. There's a lot in the back of my book. You can see the references of the material for Robert F. Kennedy and the great research that Lisa Pease has done and Shane O'Sullivan, I think, and tons of other folks to put together the story of how Sirhan, young 24-year-old man back in 1968, was more than likely deeply hypnotized and programmed over the course of maybe a year and a half or something like that to be where he was and do what he did. He fired a pistol 3 to 5 feet in front of Senator Robert F. Kennedy in a crowded, tiny little room they call the pantry behind the big ballroom where he had just addressed a tightly packed, enthusiastic crowd because he had just won the California primary on June 4th in pursuit of the presidential nomination coming up that summer of 1968. And Sirhan came out in front of him and started shooting a pistol. And what the coroner found was the three bullets, the four bullets that went through Robert F. Kennedy's clothing and the three that went into his body were all behind him on the right.
Hmm.
And from the powder burns, the pistol was no more than an inch from the back of his behind his ear, maybe even touching. And Sirhan was always 3 to 6 feet in front of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. So I could tell the whole story in any which way you want, Todd. What was the I can lay out even more than that. You want
Yeah,
to I could
yeah, go ahead.
let me lay it out, and then we
Yeah.
can talk about it. Um Lisa Pease, Pease, wrote a great book called A Lie Too Big to Fail: The Assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. And she looked at the police records. She looked at all the evidence she could find. She looked at all the evidence, the witness testimony, and this is what seems to have happened. If I get this right in my recall here, when Robert F. Kennedy came into that little pantry, crowded, his wife was a few people behind him, and all his friends and supporters, and these people were asking him to shake hands left and right. He was being led by the arm by a security guard who was at the hotel that night by the name of Thane Eugene Cesar, or Caesar. And when Sirhan started firing, there was bedlam and chaos. But this is the story that seems to have happened. That, and this is witnesses saw this, next to Sirhan, up on a table but crouching, was another man shooting.
Hmm.
And there are tons of witness reports of it sounding like machine gun fire. Now, Sirhan's pistol held 8 or 9 bullets, little 22. Okay. But when you add up the 4 that went through Robert Kennedy's clothing, the 3 that went in his body, one just went through a shoulder pad, and all the bullet holes behind him, you get up to 13, 15, plausibly up to 20 bullet marks and bullet holes, and 5, I think 5 other people wounded behind him back there.
Wow.
So you've got plausibly also, you've got people who saw flames and like confetti where Sirhan was, which is consistent with him firing blanks. So a really nice scenario that with all the evidence put together is he started firing blanks, which drew loud, noisy, which drew everyone's attention. Another guy fired bullets in this direction. The real assassin was behind the senator and pumped 4 bullets into him behind him, and he collapsed quickly. And lots of witnesses saw people leaving the room, running. One guy a man or running with a gun, and other people leaving. Now they instantly pounced on Sirhan. That's why he was indisputably captured there. And that's like practically the only thing you can know with certainty. Everything else that I just said is the most likely scenarios based on the analysis of all the evidence. The police instantly controlled the place, and there were FBI and CIA connections to the LA police, and they stripped the room of a lot of moldings in the walls, but there were some early pictures of the bullet holes. So the official story is and then when you look at the court, what happened in the trial, very legal and methodical and official things just were failed. There's a chain of evidence. It's a very specific procedure to find any evidence at a crime scene, how it has to be taken, put in a bag, labeled, and accounted for every step of the way to the police station. It's all a farce. It's all a mess. It's all chaos. And it really seems that Sirhan was set up as a patsy. He doesn't remember the shooting. And then I'll conclude the narrative or the storytelling part of it, talking about him for a minute right here. He remembers being at the hotel. He knew that Senator Kennedy was going to speak because it was election night, and if he won, he was going to talk to the ballroom, which he did, and he won, and he spoke around midnight. And he remembers waiting in the crowded room. He remembers talking to a pretty girl. And then he remembers being pounced on and being arrested and being taken away. He doesn't remember. He's 73 or 74 years old now, or 78 years old. He's up for parole. He was granted parole by the parole board. And right now we're waiting for Governor Newsom in a specific period of time to finally say either this old man can be let out on parole, or once again, his appeal for parole is going to be rejected and he's going to spend more years in jail. In the last 10 years, I believe, after many attempts to put him under hypnosis, and in his first interrogations, the doctors and others who they talked about his very strange behavior when he was arrested. He was super calm. He was super strong. They've discovered how very, very susceptible to hypnosis he was. He was very, very easily hypnotized. I think around 2012 or 20, something around there, in another deep hypnosis that they allowed to happen while he was in prison. He was hypnotized and he was led to the moment. Now President Kennedy is coming, Senator Kennedy is coming toward you, and Sirhan said something. Now I'm at the shooting range and I'm shooting at a target. I'm in range mode. So the pretty girl near him who was wearing a polka dot dress, there's a lot about her. A lot of people saw her come in with Sirhan, and then they saw her leave with another man. They saw Sirhan and a young couple come in together, and then they saw just the couple, and the girl was in a polka dot dress. Maybe she gave him the command. She was the handlers. So, and in my book, I cover all this in about, I think, 4 pages. So I let it all hang out here to try to remember and line it all up, and and paint a picture of what a cluster bomb of nonsense the official story is.
Yeah, and I remember the one part, it said several witnesses heard them running away, the couple running away, saying, "We got him to shoot, we got him to shoot," and like they were real excited about that. That is very interesting. And I actually talked to a hypnotherapist. He was on episode 51, Ray Williams, and he said that he was like, I don't know, you can't really get anyone to do anything against their will, but if they were obviously working with this guy for a long time, that's what Ray said. He's like, yeah, you would have to be doing it. It's more than just like a one time like I'm going to hypnotize you on the spot and do it. He was saying it was much more than that, and what you're describing here seems like that. So that is, that is quite the story. And I've never heard any conspiracy theory shows ever talk about RFK's assassination. So everything you're telling me, 5 people behind him were injured. Only 4 bullets went through the back, from the back to the front. This is all crazily related to his brother, the president, I'm sure, being assassinated, and all the assassinations that were happening in the 60s, and how Lyndon B. Johnson was probably involved with all of them.
Yeah.
He's never brought up, and that's why in the conspiracy theory community, you have a lot of big names that are pushed a lot. George Bush, both of the Bushes, and you get these types of names, but then, and people say the mafia, the CIA, the FBI, but the one person who had the means and capability to have Malcolm X, MLK, JFK, RFK, to have all these high profile things occur, who was the one man, another 3-letter name, LBJ, what's your take on that and on his involvement, if anything?
Well, I'll get to him in the order of things you just mentioned. Witnesses saw the young couple leave the Ambassador Hotel saying, we shot him. Not we got him to shoot, but we shot him. We shot him.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And most particularly, a young woman named Sandra Serrano was on a staircase outside because it was very, very hot and crowded inside. She was getting some air. She had seen the 3 of them go in. And then she heard the couple say, just before they came outside, we shot him. Now, they may have been telling someone else who was a spotter or someone else in the plot, like mission accomplished. And as the couple came down the stairs, Sandra said, Who did you shoot? And they said Senator Kennedy, and they just kept running down. So they weren't maybe like telling the parking lot or bragging about it. She overheard it, and they answered just to keep moving. But
Oh, wow.
a few people saw this couple, and a couple people, I think, heard that. Robert F. Kennedy was pursuing the nomination in 1968, and he was in just a couple of months. He declared his candidacy in March, and he was killed in June. In that 2 or 3 months, he generated a real growing enthusiasm because young people and smart people were excited to get him back in the White House to recapture all that was lost and wounded when President Kennedy was killed in 1963. Lyndon Johnson is well implicated in Kennedy's assassination, president's assassination, Martin Luther King, and Robert F. Kennedy. I don't know Malcolm X murder that deeply, 1965, but I'm going to look into it. And LBJ may very well have been the spearhead or played a bigger role in the last two of Martin Luther King in April and Robert F. Kennedy in June in 1968. He seems to have known well, and he was well positioned for the president to replace Kennedy as president, but that was orchestrated from much higher than Vice President Johnson or J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI. As I have learned in talking to people who've studied this for years, Johnson and Hoover were so corrupt, called so blackmailable, that you could make them do whatever you want, as are, in my opinion, the worst of the politicians, the world leaders of all countries. That's you've got such inexplicable anti-human, policies and pursuits.
It must be a
Because,
prerequisite.
well, unfortunately, it's synonymous, and this goes back hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
To say politician, you don't have to say corrupt, because it's like saying
implied.
a stinky skunk. It's like, well, it's redundant. A skunk is stinky.
Mm-hmm.
A politician is corrupt. This is general, broad, stereotypical, but there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
And the President Kennedy's assassination goes to the real string pullers way up
Like
top.
biblical.
Yeah. And I've even learned it after my book, how it might be a fulfillment or a part of a running feud for the Fitzgeralds. Maybe Paul and Liz got into it a little bit in your interview with them.
Oh, no.
About the Fitzgeralds versus the royal family going back 1,000 years.
Oh, wow. I got to talk to them about the. No, I didn't. They didn't mention any of that.
And that's after my book,
What?
Fitzgerald versus who?
The Fitzgeralds versus the Royals, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah,
But
the killing of the king.
Exactly. But you commented before that the details that indicate conspiracy behind Robert F. Kennedy in 68, you don't see it on documentaries or in other things. And that's what was so exciting about, researching these things, Todd, for me, just to riff on this for a couple of minutes, that we're not really supposed to talk about, the mainstream doesn't really like to talk about the Kennedys. Why? Well, because it just stirs up the tremendous controversy about the president's assassination, the farcicality of the official story, all the writers and efforts and conferences for 60 years almost now, trying to scream from the rooftop, the emperor has no clothes. The official story is a lie. The government and the corporate media have been lying since day one. It was a coup d'etat. We became a banana republic at that point, a farce of what we're pretending to be. And since then, presidents have been pawns and puppets and whores for the big banking and powerful money interests of the world,
Pharmaceuticals.
all of the above, all of the above. And um, so tell me, what other angles of RFK were you intrigued about and wanted to explore?
Well, so I wanted to get into, you know, what was it? Was it the actual him running for president, or was it because he was JFK's brother? Because there is this warring family type of thing, and you can see the Kennedys were one of the 13 families, and what just happened with RFK Jr. just got kicked off of YouTube. So there is this thing where the Kennedys are the in crowd, but then again, they crossed a line at some point, and they're the two biggest names of Kennedys were put down. And not a great term for it, but that's how they, I'm sure, look at it, and that they were putting them down for breaking the rules. So so what was it that RFK did that got them to kill him?
Without before getting to they're one of the 13 families, because we'll have to explain what that means to folks who may not
Right.
know what that means. Just nuts and bolts tangible to any mainstream believer who happens to find this conversation. It's enough for them to be challenged to read my book or Lisa Pease's book or any book about Robert F. Kennedy to see, first of all, the official story is a lie. There's a cover up. There was a conspiracy. And we're dealing with the question, well, why? Why were we not allowed to have him as president? Okay. Immediately we can see he was going to end the Vietnam War like that. Okay. And would have saved half the casualties from that point on. Right there would have really saved a lot of lives right there. And he was going to empower the poor. He was taking on what Martin Luther King was working for, civil rights. And by 1968, Martin Luther King had also said, we've got to stop this war, and we've got to get economic fairness for the poor people. We've got to work on the economic conditions of the economy as a whole. And Robert F. Kennedy was synonymous with that. And the economic powers of America wanted to keep that war going and didn't want to do anything to empower the disenfranchised, poor people, Black people, Indians suffering on the reservations, Mexicans, undocumented workers, and illegal immigrants. Robert F. Kennedy represented a very inclusive, sane, heart-centered, intelligent, compassionate fulfillment of what this country's supposed to be. Land of the free, home of the brave, where everyone's got the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we're going to and the government's job is to referee a level playing field for the people, not working for the special interests or the elite to leverage everything into their favor while we work harder and harder for less and less. That's why Robert Kennedy was not allowed to be president of the United States. Get this, in some reading here and there, you see allusions. I can't state it as a fact because it's just so blurry after a while, and you read with speed. But I have seen the suggestions that not only were people saying Martin Luther King ought to be Robert Kennedy's vice president, but there's evidence, I believe I remember accurately, that they were in communication about such a ticket. Now, right there, anyone who knows history has got to pause and just say, dear Lord, what we lost. How had they become president, we would be in an alternate reality where the rich of the world do not have a stranglehold on all the means and supports of life. We've got to deal with the world we have, but that's how close we, the people, last got to creating a space where good, authentic people could get that close to a presidential nomination. I can't I can't imagine the miracles it would take for that to happen again. But that's why Robert Kennedy was taken from us. Too good, too real. And moreover, he was secretly, but you can't keep a secret from the CIA and the FBI, investigating his brother's death from 1963. And he was stated to those very, very close to him, I'm going to find my brother's real killers. I just have to get into the White House first. So the big powers that killed the president were not going to let that happen. So I don't think there may have been a huge vendetta against the Kennedy family in general, but I can definitely, and I do marshal the facts and the evidence that there was a huge case against the president.
Well, I'm glad you brought all that stuff up because I was actually going to ask those two very questions that you answered right at the end. That MLK and RFK running together, there were rumblings about that, and it makes sense that they would want to take them out if they caught hold of that, because only 5 years after, well, I guess it would have been 6 years by the time the election happened. But only 6 years after JFK's murder, something could have been done still at that time. But now we're at a point where if anyone's still alive that was involved, the damage has been done. How many years ago at this point has it been? So if those responsible would have been held responsible at that time, or at least within 6-7 years, whatever it ended up being, that would have been, like you said, a whole new trajectory. And they couldn't allow a white man and a black man to be running together and spreading this peace and love, and let's get rid of war, and let's find the real killers who murdered a president. And there's so many different people will tell you that have researched it, for that's like the only thing that they've researched, and they can tell you why it could be 20 million different people. There's so much information on this. I think it's over 5 million documents, and every document isn't just one page long. A document is a document. So there's so much information in this that there's no way to sift through all of it and find a conclusive answer, because there was probably all of the above were probably involved: CIA, mafia, FBI, the elite, George H.W. Bush, LBJ. Everyone you could think of was probably involved in the JFK thing, and then to a much lesser degree the RFK and MLK. All these things taking place in the 60s. It really traumatized the nation. That generation, the boomers. That's a really traumatic event. Then you have the Cold War coming in, and the hippie movement coming in. All these different things. These were traumatizing things that kept happening over and over. And then this is the generation now that's kind of putting a lid on anyone that's being red pilled. All the millennials and Gen Zs that are talking about weird stuff, talking about being spiritual, and they were never spiritual, so they don't have any understanding. But it's because of all the trauma that was placed on everybody. MK Ultra, MK Often, MK Search, all these different mind control programs that were happening on the world. Agent Orange. We could just go on and on about all the different operations that the CIA was doing on the American people and the world at large during this time. But it really sent us on a different course. And like you said so brilliantly, we would be on a much different timeline had those two gotten office.
Yeah. And those, the elite of the elite who possess the world's wealth and own and control the world's resources. I've learned a ton from my publisher, Chris Milligan, in the last year or so, working with him on the weekly podcast that Shrine Day does. So I'm going to sound, I'm just so grateful to what I've heard him discuss with 50 some authors week after week for the last 13 months. He started studying conspiracies and CIA drugs and skull and bones 50 years ago. He's been studying this stuff a long time. So the elite of the elite who own the mining, the metal, and the money, who control America and have controlled America really since the 1800s. Todd, we may not have come close at all in 1968 to having a good president in Robert F. Kennedy, because the lock was on early. We were very free. We were a very freaky thing in the 1700s when America got formed. And folks, this is all in my book, threaded throughout, and then particularly in a nice little chapter called Brief History of the United States. And it's worth saying and hearing, because that's where our hope and our power, I'm going to say salvation, lies, is the fact that we ain't dead yet. Okay? So just imagine, uniquely on the planet, the United States of America, founded as it was for free people, talking that everyone's got the right to be free. Well, we had a little problem with slavery. We had that was a hypocrisy that had to be adjusted. It got adjusted in a horrible way with a brutal war that increased power and control for money interests, who then started ballooning corporate power in the late 1800s and controlling mass media. First, there were just newspapers, and then in the early 1900s there was radio, and then there was cinema, and then mid 20th century television, and now the internet. And it's that same control to brainwash us, and like Paul and Liz talk about, control the narrative, to tell the story about what's going on in a way that maximizes power and control for these forces and minimizes any self-confidence, power, control, or rights of the American people. So from the beginning of America to where we are now, it was a process, because each generation, starting with the founding generation, knew what rights were and how tyrannical government could be. And that is in the writings of the founding. To read what that generation, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Paine, Patrick Henry, those are the only thing, the first thing, the prerequisite academic thing that every human being on the planet should be raised with, because standing on that, everything else is possible. A life in the arts, a life in politics, a life in science, a life in mathematics, a life in sports. Everything is possible if you're standing on the concept of the sovereignty of the people, of our right to create a government that serves us and represents us and referees us, not in favor of the rich versus the poor, because that's tribal and savage. In the jungle, might makes right. I'm bigger and stronger than you. Therefore, little Johnny, I can take your lunch money. That's children. That's might making right. That's bullies. That's savage. That's animals. Okay? To be a human being requires the concept of rights. My rights don't let you, bigger and stronger, take my lunch money. And the government is supposed to represent all of us so that the big and the rich can't take advantage of the small and the poor. And that's what was fiercely discussed and debated at the founding. And then each generation, it got watered down, and the government was able to excuse. And as there were more and more people and more problems, it got easier and easier to let government suggest the solutions and to say, yeah. And especially if those solutions paid certain people and certain factions, oh yeah, I'm working for the government, I'm going to implement these solutions. And it gets entangled with subsidies for corporations, because as people got richer and richer, they're able to buy more and more politicians. And that's how we've gone 180 to this completely corrupt fascism. And the definition of fascism is simply the merger of corporate and state power. That's all fascism is. Jim Marrs, Marrs, passed away in 2017, I think, after writing many wonderful books exposing the truth about these realities. And he wrote a book called, I think, The Terror Conspiracy, 9/11 and the Loss of Liberty, something like that, in which he said in Nazi Germany, the state took over the corporations. In modern America, the corporations have taken over the state. The end result is the same. That's all fascism is. It's the blending of corporate and state power. And that's where we are right now. Have I've gotten off track, or I forgot where I was going with all this.
Hey,
Where was I going?
You were going right where you went because there's no mistakes, right? So that was all beautiful. You said a lot in there, and it's interesting that the Freemasons that started the country, it's not even sure how many that there were. Some say 13. I've seen 53. I've seen 50. No one's really sure, but
You're counting potentially the signers of the Declaration, or
of the 56.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. So in the secret societies, they have been running everything, and they have been getting involved more and more. Now, we have 4 U.S. presidents that have actually been assassinated, and you can ask any American, you probably get like 2% will know that there's been 4 that were actually assassinated. It was Lincoln and Kennedy, obviously, but then you had James Garfield in 1881 and William McKinley in 1901. But there have been attempts on Andrew Jackson, on Franklin D. Roosevelt, on Harry S. Truman after he was president.
Teddy Roosevelt and Gerald Ford in the 70s.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go. They don't even have that one on here. Oh, yeah. Teddy Roosevelt is on here as well. I skipped him. But, it's just, how is the president of the United States being targeted the way that they were so often in the 1800s? I mean, 1835, 1865, 1881, 1901, 1912. I mean, this is some crazy stuff. If you talk about today, where we are in this time, if we had an attempt on a president, that would be earth shattering. But we don't even think about what was going on back then, and who tells what history is but the victor? So who knows what has been going on? Have you ever heard of Tartaria?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so Tartaria, it's a new conspiracy theory, but it's not really new. It's an old world that was covered up by Russia and communist Soviet Union, and I actually have a globe that from the 1940s or 50s that has Tartaria real big. It was apparently all of Russia. It was like all of Asia, and
I've heard of the Tartars.
okay, yeah, the Tartars.
That's classic history, but teach me.
Yeah, well, there's so much to it that I couldn't bring it all. If you wanted something to research, you can look up mud floods, you can look up orphan trains, you can look up the Great Reset or Tartaria resets. That there is this civilization, and we call the structures now, we call them Greco-Roman. Everything that we say Greco-Roman style or Gothic style. They talk about the cathedrals and the mosques. Well, there's scientific type of circumstantial evidence that would prove that these religious buildings were actually energy buildings, that this whole place was free energy, and there was the cross on these certain buildings were just conductors for electricity, for lightning strikes, and the crescent moon was a different kind of conductor, and that they also had mercury in there, and it also involves the Nazi bell, the time machine UFO type of bell, that every bell tower that is now empty because they used to house these vehicles that you could fly around in. and that this stuff was possibly going on in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, and that's when all this warring stuff was happening in the late 1700s to early 1800s. Well, all throughout the 1800s actually, because you had the War of 1812 that was going on between the French and Indians in America, but also with the French and the Russians, which would mean that it was a world war, but they don't tell us it's a world war. They tell us, oh no, it's just the War of 1812. So, it's all covered up, but there was world wars going on throughout all the 1800s, and with all these different assassination attempts on U.S. presidents, it's like, what was happening? What is the actual history? Well, now that things are being uncovered, because like with Tartaria, all of our government buildings, basically, at least like one government building in every city, or sometimes they're schools, they they're Greco-Roman style. They're these fantastical, beautiful buildings with the columns and archways, and they stand to the test of time. They just don't break down. They look like castles, and they don't, a lot of them didn't used to have bathrooms in them. It's like, what were they actually? Because they weren't used for people. They were used to house some kind of steam energy, or there's so much to it. Like if you were to take the glass windows out of these churches and mosques, the way the wind would hit would just be would be the sound, what's it called? Sound kinetics. Yeah, yeah. When you do sound, you take a speaker and you dump salt or
Yes,
whatever
yes,
on it.
yes.
Yeah, and it'll move around. Well, that's how these are all designed, and that's what. Yeah, so these were some kind of buildings that had nothing to do with the religion,
Right,
that had everything to do with energy,
right.
and there were canals everywhere, and there's just so much, like all the buildings, for example, in like San Francisco and New York City, they have windows that, are ground level, but the dirt will be like right in the middle of the window, and it's like they wouldn't build it that way, and it's like, oh, you can see they were digging everything out because there was a mud flood. I'm not sure how it happened, soil liquefaction, the earth heated up in some way. There's so many different possibilities, but the history of everything, I don't mean to get off on a tangent, but the history of everything is just so chaotic
Hmm.
that we can just have 7 or 8 presidents shot at within a 100-year period or so, and most Americans have no idea about any of them.
Hmm.
How are kids even being taught about Lincoln and JFK? At least, I don't know these if they are.
Think about, tell me now or email me later some nice source for that Tatarian
Oh, I'll send you some stuff. There's a lot
history.
of people who are doing really good work on it.
Do you know the work on the internet of, he's really a radio host, but he makes YouTube videos, Max Egan out of Australia, I
Yeah,
think.
Max Egan. Yeah, he knows a lot about it.
Yeah, it's familiar. Yeah, I've heard of him talk about this kind of stuff, the buildings, how old they are, and I haven't looked into it.
And the World's Fairs are involved in it as well.
It gets into, right. It gets
so
into
much.
like the ley lines of the energy from like
Mhm.
London, or I think Boston, New York, Philly, and Washington D.C. might be on a straight line. Energy centers and vortexes and things like that. I can talk about American history into what you were just describing. No, modern Americans are generally very, very ignorant about history. Unlike 50 years ago when I was in school, there was still the remnants of the classic reading, writing, arithmetic, and there was a foundation. It really changed in the 1960s to socialize us into neurotic, relativistic, uncertain, and indecisive blobs of masses who will just obey authority and believe whatever comes from authority, whether it's a teacher, politician, or a news reader, or a doctor in a white coat. That's an abomination. So we don't know how to think for ourselves. And to the number of presidents who've gotten killed, it might be a legacy of the ancient ritual of the killing of the king, which goes back thousands of years, especially in England, maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500 years, which goes back to Greek myths. It's about and it's savage, it's tribal, and but it's probably also the belief systems of the elite who still influence and push out their belief systems, but undercover, by deception, Luciferian, dark energy, or demonic energies, demonic spirits, and things like that. But the killing of the king was a something that had to happen every now and then because it would renew life. It was honoring nature's everything is something's food. Everything dies so that something else can live. And that's part of a harmony of nature, but it's perverted by these folks who want to manipulate it to maintain their own advantage. I'll mention a book I haven't read yet, but I was participated in an interview with the author, Sarah Whalen, called Royal Vengeance. And the subtitle is something like Human Sacrifice and the Royal Family, and it's about Princess Diana, about how she was, the Greek Diana, even the legacy name. So that might be the legacy into the presidents. And then don't forget what good old humanity has learned about trauma-based mind control. You brutalize, you victimize, you traumatize, you rape someone as young as possible to fracture their minds. So to survive, they're neurotic, they're nuts, they're compartmentalized, and they're your slave. As long as you're nice to them, then they'll do whatever you want, as long as you don't beat them again. So that's how a vicious person maintains rule in their house or in their company, their corporation, or in the army. It's sadistic. The CIA leveraged it with MK Ultra. Trauma-based mind control. I can control your mind if I traumatize you strategically over time.
Are you aware of MK Often?
No,
So
but let me just, if I can just
Okay,
quickly,
go ahead, yeah.
I'll pin that. And I'm looking at, American history now. At least every 20 years, there's a horrific, a real giant trauma for each generation. Each generation has to be subdued and cowed and freaked out and surrender to authority. Let's leapfrog. Right now, it's the health thing going on, which might rename nameless so that we don't get deplatformed and delisted and things like that. This is a worldwide trauma of epic proportions. Everyone is terrified, justifiably, and it's brutal. And we're raising children with the protocols that are just going to make them mind slaves and alienated from themselves and incapable of confidence or embracing other human beings. They're going to be afraid of other human beings because of the trauma happening right now. And very quickly leapfrogging. 20 years ago, there was 9/11. That was a massive trauma to the whole world who saw the footage of that. And then the war on terror that happened after that. 20 years before that, there was a failed assassination attempt against President Reagan. But you could say like all the little wars and all the little horrors and all the little terror events fulfill the function of traumatizing the population on a regular basis so that they surrender more authority to their government. In 1986, America, and maybe part of Canada and other parts of the world, put all their school children in front of a television to watch a school teacher go up in a space shuttle with other astronauts, and then it blew up in front of their eyes.
Right.
Traumatized that whole generation watching that. Quickly, 20 years before that, President Kennedy, Vietnam War, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy assassinations, major trauma. 20 years before that, 1940s, World War freaking II. 20 before, World War I, bloodletting at an unprecedented scale to that time. 20 years before that in America, President Garfield gets assassinated in 1881. Let alone the ongoing slaughter and bloodletting of the natives, Indians, Native Americans. 20 years before that, the Civil War and the assassination of the father figure, the king figure, President Abraham Lincoln. 20 years before that, the Mexican-American War, the first time we just used our army to just kill who we wanted and take the land that we wanted, all of California, New Mexico, Arizona, all that. We had all of Mexico. We gave it back to the border. So did you remember the movie Apocalypto by Mel Gibson? That shows the Incas and the Mayans, and all the blood, the sacrificing and all the bloodletting. Blood sacrifices, Todd, might be part of what it takes to be a ruling elite of the elite going back to the dawn of time. And that's maybe why all this constant carnage.
Are you familiar with the biblical terms for sacrifice? What the what it represented?
Tell me.
Okay, so what you would do, you take two, and I think this applies very heavily to what secret societies do, is you take one of your animals and you give them the best perfect life, and you treat them
Oh
better
yeah,
than all
yeah,
the
yeah.
rest,
And the other one that you
is
imbue
the
and wrap
lame
with all
one.
your sins and flaws and
Well,
faults. That's the
so what
scapegoat.
Yeah, so what you do, you actually do, so you raise the one perfect and then you kill it. And you put all your sins on it and then you kill it. And the other one, the black sheep or the scapegoat, you raise that one as the lame one, as the runt. You don't treat it all that well, and then you set it free to the world. So, this is very much how many politicians and financial people, corporations, have these different children that one gets killed and then the other one, take our president for example. His son Bo died in battle, in the military, and now his crackhead son
The
is.
runt.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very obvious when you
Can you
look at it in
think of
those
a
terms.
title or of a source that teaches me that?
Well, me.
Okay, good.
But no, that I mean that's so the biblical stuff, that, and it's very significant in that Jesus was this perfect, the perfect one that was killed, and now we're all the black sheep that are about to be set free to the world, and we're gonna.
I can see this parallel beautifully with President Kennedy because he really
Oh
was
yeah.
a fair-haired child. And then we got the stinking, lame, rotting, disgusting, corrupt, perverted Lyndon Johnson
Hmm.
gets to reign until he has a natural death.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, and it goes so well with all the parallels that go with what everything secret societies are doing, why they're doing all these bloodletting sacrifices, and so on and so forth. It's it
It's
wasn't taught
something.
in the Old Testament. That was how sacrifice was meant to be, and they've taken it and they've alchemized it to humans. Because as you've been saying so eloquently throughout this conversation, that they look at nature, they apply natural law to humans, but we aren't part of nature. We are supposed to be above that. We aren't supposed to be, oh, the bigger one just comes and takes from the smaller one. We're supposed to have more thought than that. We're supposed to say, oh, no, I'm not going to steal from you. Let's do this together, because
Mm.
we have the ability and the capabilities to speak to each other and work through problems, unlike animals who have to work it out in whatever way they work it out. Natural law doesn't apply to us. So when you see like Satanists, the fake Satanists that say, oh, we want to be nature, all that type of stuff. Well, you actually don't want to do that, because then that means that someone, whoever's bigger and stronger than you, is allowed to kill you. That's how they view it, and that's why they think that they're okay by doing these things. Oh, because we're living by natural law. So, it's a really screwed up way of thinking, and if you start thinking along those lines, you can logically convince yourself that, oh, this is just how we're supposed to be, and you can convince other people who aren't firm in understanding that we are spiritual beings, that we aren't physical beings. And it's hard to get that message across when we have all the mind control. And as I was saying with the MK often, so that came in right after MK Ultra. It was part of this group of mind control techniques that were called MK Search. So a lot of people don't even know about that. They just know about the MK Ultra. But there was a whole slew of operations that the CIA was running in the 70s. I mean, they're still running them today,
How
obviously.
did the is that often OFTEN you're saying?
Yeah,
How
yes.
did that differ from MK Ultra?
Well, I don't. Here, I'll pull it up right now because
Oh,
I
I don't.
haven't
No,
looked
that's
into
fine.
it.
I know that they had a lot of sub designations, and I know that there were, for instance, just inside MK Ultra, I know that there were tons of branch programs that probably specified different modalities and techniques and experiments that
Yeah,
they
it was.
freakishly indulge themselves in.
It's just saying here that it was the U.S. Department of Defense developed this in conjunction with the CIA's MK Ultra. So this was the Department of Defense's version of
Yeah.
MK Ultra, and they called it MK Often, and it was later changed to Project MK Search. So I gave a little bit of wrong information in there, but you know,
Well, you're making the point, which is that it's a wilderness of mirrors, as James Jesus Angleton referred to intelligence work, and he was a high-ranking CIA so and so in the 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s, I think. And the collusion of the media is complete. And you could argue, anyone could, if you mark, you could just, anyone could just read my book and then come away and say, well, okay, if everything in there is true, Bruce, it's a full spectrum attack on our peace of mind and our ability to be cheerful about life. That's what we're up against. And it's very, very intentional. And this is where you and I could keep exploring the horrors or try to explore some solutions and remedies and reasons to be cheerful. If we don't do it now, we got to save time at the very end for some reasons to be cheerful. I'm in your hands, Todd.
yeah. No, go ahead, go right into it.
Oh my. Well, I would just mine. The bottom line for me is having a spiritual imagination, and like we talked about in our previous interview, but tangibly, what's happening here in late September 2021. I repeat, what it would be, how nice it would be for folks to rediscover, get intrigued about, what was the American experiment set up to be. And by golly, if we're still pretending to be that, then are we hypocrites? Yes, because we're not fulfilling it to even a fraction of a degree. You had wanted to talk about JFK. I don't know if we did that as much as you wanted to. I'm prepared to, and I love doing that. And it's a nice fork in the road. He's a nice breaking point for certain things that had momentum, certain traditions, certain powers and rights that Americans still had up until 1963. And then he was a cliff's edge that the country fell over or was really pushed over. Mm-hmm. That wasn't that long ago, to anyone younger than me. I'm going to be 60 in December. So I was a kid in the 60s. I was a teenager in the 70s. And, the Vietnam War was on television as I was growing up. And my childhood is as close to me as yours is to you. It's just over my shoulder, So anyone who's in their 20s or 30s right now, as close as your childhood is to you to reflect and remember, it's just behind your back. You can just turn your head and there's your childhood. It wasn't that long ago. That's what the 1960s and 70s are to me. They're right in my hand. I'm like a time traveler. I come from the 20th century and I remember vividly what I remember vividly, really vivid, in the 70s, up till 10 years old, you kind of remember things kind of chaotically and emotionally, and it's mostly around your family. All that to say, JFK was not that freaking long ago. And I remember talking to young folks, people a little older than me, and then adults about his presidency. And I say that just to share my sense that it's reclaimable. I've seen all the twists and turns in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the war on terror. And now, wow, how more and more of our rights were taken away from us. More and more horrible things happened intentionally by the rich who control our government, blamed on innocent people so we could go kill them just because we want to and make money doing it. Here's the point. You had a point to all that, Bruce? Yes, I do. Something like you wrote in your lovely review of my book, give it to someone who's on the verge of waking up or who's just completely confused, like nothing's making sense, to say there, everything's all right, it makes total sense because nothing's accidental. This is all being inflicted on us intentionally. I can't tell you what a relief that was to me to
Mhm.
see, oh, that means there's really a dragon to slay. If mere humans are intentionally making this up, and there's far fewer of them than good regular people who just want to be nice to each other, we can overcome it all when enough life-loving and nice, decent people roll up their sleeves, draw a line in the sand, and say, take that back, or give me liberty, or give me death,
Mhm.
or over my dead body. When enough of us have that stand and can take that kind of a stand, and I submit to you, Todd, it just takes knowing the truth. Because if we know we are being intentionally assaulted, enough of us are going to stand up and say, you can't do that to my wife. You can't do that to my children. You can't do that to my old parents who can't run, who gave me everything I have. You can't touch them. And that's why they want to keep us freaked out and crazy with 1,000 freak stories and upsetting dangers a day, so we can't just pull ourselves together and say no thanks. So that's what I'll say to start a conversation about what do we do and how do we do it.
Yeah, well, I would be very interested in seeing a world that operated if JFK never was assassinated. How would have that world looked like? How would it have operated? Because I look at pictures from the 70s of an American beach, and you don't find fat on anybody. And now you look at it, and it's like, all right, you might want to put some clothes back on. Just the overall what has happened to us, and it hasn't been that long, like you said, and all it takes is two generations really to swing things dramatically. It takes two generations, and if they get this generation, i- if we can get enough of us that wake up to what's going on, and we can draw that line in the sand and say enough. You're not going to tell me what to do. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your title is. You are not better than me. You're not above me. You're not going to tell me what to do. You don't know what's best for me. You don't even know what's best for you. You are not going to tell me what to do. And this is going to sound weird, but it goes back to the seatbelt laws. Being forced to wear a seatbelt was, in my opinion, was a huge win for them and a huge blow for us. Even though seatbelts may protect us, 99.99999% of the time we don't need them because we don't get in accidents all that often. But when we do have them, they're nice to have on if you do. But being forced to wear them led to then car insurance was forced upon us, and then it was work insurance, and insurance companies gone bananas, and pharmaceutical companies being able to force things to lawmakers, and with the whole the car seat thing, or seatbelt thing in a car, is that was another thing that car manufacturers could then add on. So, it's another price to add on. And that's another thing to control people. And while it's small and it is logical, what ends up happening is you do something else that's small and logical, and then you do something else that's small and logical, and you change perception each step of the way. So that by the time you're at step 10, you're so perverted from the actual truth, but you got there in such a slow manner that it's like, well, I'm not doing, I'm just doing what's right. When Justin Trudeau comes out and says, we're going to reward people who do the right thing, talking about a social credit score, that you have to have some kind of passport in order to go to places. And if you don't have one, you're not going to be allowed to participate. You've been a bad boy or you've been a bad girl. You know, who is to say what is right? Who is to say, you know, why does somebody, not they, why does somebody get a say over me? And once enough people stand up and say, nah, Now, I'm exempt from masks. I don't need any reason other than I'm not going to wear one. You know, that's why I'm exempt. I don't need religious exemption. I don't need any kind of exemption. I don't want to put something in my body. I'm not going to do it. You know, so when we get enough people to stand up and do that, then we can come from a place like, all right, well, what do we do instead? Once we get there, then it's like, all right, how do we take our ball and go home? Because right now, you know, we're
Yeah.
all sitting at the park and they're playing with our basketball and we're just watching. And we're seeing like our friends are playing with them and we're like, man, you guys shouldn't be playing, but we're just going to watch. And pretty soon we're going to be like, all right, no, we're not watching no more. Give us the ball. Come on, give it to us. And now, so what are we going to do when we get the ball? You know, what is our plan of attack here? You know, and I don't mean attack FBI and CIA and whoever's listening. You know, we're not actually planning attacks. We're not actually terrorists, no matter what you may classify us as.
Right. What's our strategy going to be? Yeah. We're at the fork in the road. We are at, you know, right before World War II or right before 9/11. We're right here, right now in September 2020. And everything you just said is what's at stake. That's what's happening. Those are the nooses, the rope around our neck that's getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter almost daily. And to start conversations about all the things that are probably lies that are so-called justifying this pressure on us, because people say yes and they go along with it because they think it's the truth, period. And their jobs are at stake, so they believe when they're told that it's all necessary, it's all true, you know, and they don't do an ounce of research about anything. You know, there would be a raging debate about something as simple as masks if enough people did their own research and saw, before this year, last year, there is practically zero medical literature that says anything. I think there is no medical literature that studied the usefulness of face coverings like that on the general population as a protection against a supposed thing you could catch in the general public. And they all say like useless.
Mm-hmm.
Not enough people know that because look at how many wear the things. Look at how many mock and belittle those who want to push back just that one particular thing. And you described being able to say yes and no to what happens to me because you have internalized the idea that, Todd, you've got rights. So, which get contested only if there's really a threat. So if there's really a threat, comes right back to the conversation of what's true and what's not. And it's about studying and thinking and, you know, for oneself to debate these things. And it goes, and if we've got rights, then we've got the ability to have a conversation about, you know, where do my rights stop and where do yours start? And that's called, you know, that's the public sphere. And that's where that's what government is supposed to be, the referee. Because on my property and in my house, I've got more rights than when I step onto the sidewalk, which is a shared public space. And I'm walking in that direction and you're walking in this direction. We've got to negotiate. How do we step aside? How friendly we are? That's all part of cultures and traditions that a community used to have. So here's the solution. I just got to it again. It's community and it's decentralization, because to centralize power is how power can control the masses. If it's centralized in Washington, D.C., or if it's centralized in the World Economic Forum or in the World Health Organization policies, et cetera, it's remote. And I don't know you as a neighbor, and I don't know you as a local member of my local community. And I don't have a, you know, but if more and more power could come back to the localities, back to the states, back to the counties, and back to the towns, and then back to our neighborhood, and then back to our street, then we've got a say and we can become friends as we get together. And you could argue that the protocols of the illness for the last year and a half have accomplished the most major thing it's accomplished is to divide and conquer us. It's to separate us from each other. We literally can't get in the same room. If we can't avoid getting in the same room at a store, we can't get closer than 6 feet. And we have to cover our faces so we can't read each other emotionally, friend or foe. And we can't easily and conveniently and quickly exchange information and have a conversation, because just facially we communicate so much as humans, because our processor up here is freakishly large for our needs. Our brains are freakishly large for the animal that we are, and yet it's dulled down. And now now that comes into all the bad food you talked about, all the obesity, all the chemical ingestion to not only fatten us and
Cell
sicken us.
phones.
Oh yeah, to distract us. Oh, the EMF rays or everything, just all that, the assault to dumb us down, to calcify our pineal gland, and fear to make us cower and ingest all the alcohol, indulge all the addictions, to run and hide, to put our hands over our face like kids and say, you can't see me, because we're scared and we just want to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
So to feel safe takes a revolution. And that comes down to recognizing, wow, I'm terrified 24/7. I'm vibrating with fear and anxiety. I heard a university professor recently say the kids are her university students. She said they're in the fetal position. She went on to explain they're filled with despair. They're shaking with fear. They think the economy is precarious. There are no jobs. There's a deadly disease that's going to kill them. And man is destroying the climate and the planet. And they're in the fetal position. So those who benefit from having 335 million Americans, a vast majority of them quivering with fear and addicted to opioids and alcohol and drugs and video games and pornography and just checked out, those guys win. The elite of the elite. I'm always packing the same snowball, but just in a different way, with this litany of horrors of, wow, and to take it apart and come back to basics. Here's the solution. Unless you want to interject right now, Todd, about anything. I am such a mic hog sometimes.
No, I mean, everything you're saying there is exactly right. And, we don't look at, as a people, the mental illness that is going on in this country that's running rampant. We want to connect different diseases to different medical procedures. I don't want to say any names because of what's happening.
Yeah.
But there's been studies and there's been testimony out there that one thing does cause another thing, but we never look at, does one thing cause depression? Does this one thing cause anxiety? And when I'm told that these children have to wear masks at school because there's the off chance that a virus with a survival rate that is only 8 children out of, I think, 800,000 from August 2020 to August 2021 died from, only 8 in the entire, out of everybody in the, all the children in the world, or not in the world, in America, only 8 have died from this disease. When they say that now everyone has to wear a mask on the off chance that your child has it unknowingly and spreads it, it's like, well, when I was told that, I said, you are making these children suffer now, because the response I was given was, oh, well, if it's not a legal thing, we'll suffer the consequences of that decision. And I said, no, you don't get it. You're making children suffer now. Your bad decisions as adults are making children suffer now. And you're giving these kids so much anxiety and depression and fear of their fellow human It like when people talk to me that when they have a mask on, I don't have the greatest hearing, and sometimes I'll be honest, I don't even know who's speaking or where it's coming from. If you're wearing a mask and you're just trying to talk normal, and I don't see anything facial movements moving, I don't know that you're the one that's speaking. And if I do know you're the one
Yeah.
that's speaking, when you have a thing covering your face, I can't hear you. You have to project your voice.
Yeah.
And you know, when I see people driving alone in a car with a mask on, and I see people weed whacking on the side of a road by themselves with a mask on, when I'm told that, you know, for medical procedures, only one parent can go back at a time with their child, but they can both go back there, but it has to be separately. You know, it's like, what, on what planet, you know, there is no thinking that goes behind that. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And our time is well spent by encouraging folks who are not in our camp. Maybe all your listeners are in your camp, and we can review. I tried to write my book, and I try to remember to steer conversations, hopefully not in an obnoxious way, Todd, to where this conversation's going, toward how do we, who think we're right about this way of looking at things, turn around someone who thinks they're right because they believe Fauci and Biden and governor this and governor that. They believe that the masks are necessary. We
mhm.
can't just say they're unnecessary, because then they think we're tinfoil hat, Trump loving lunatics. So I, it,
Well, that's a
yeah,
good question that you got there. And the only thing that I think that might work now is that I'm still alive and I haven't worn a mask and I haven't put anything in my body other than when I was sick. I was sick for a few days.
yeah.
I took emergency brand vitamin C with zinc in it, and I took that for about 2 weeks every day, and I was better within 2 days. And I
Yeah.
had night sweats, I had muscle aches, but that's all I had to take.
Yeah, a bad cold or a flu.
Yeah, I've had
Uh,
worse flus before.
Hey, anyone listening who hates Todd and me because you believe the mainstream story about the illness, listen to this. I saw a video recently where somebody filmed themselves holding the American Medical Association, some big book, and they flipped to the page they had marked, and they brought their phone real close to the page, and it said coronavirus, and then it moved in a real close up. It moved over to the definition of coronavirus. It said common cold.
Hmm.
It was an old book, maybe like 20, 30 years old. You could tell. So folks, think, ponder that. Ponder Todd's symptoms. He just said sounds like a bad cold or maybe a flu.
Yeah, well, so the weird part about it is the losing the sense of smell and taste. I think that's what freaks everybody out. But
Hmm.
those symptoms come, and this will go into something a little bit bigger in a moment here. But these symptoms come from radiation poisoning. They're your, you know, when you're poisoned with radiation, it's you lose the sense of smell, lose the sense of taste. Now, there have been periods of time throughout our history that the sun has poisoned us with radiation to the point that people have gotten severe cases of the flu. And this, before 1860, there was no such thing as the seasonal flu. There were only these pockets of space of maybe like 3 years here, 5 years there, that people would be getting sick in this type of sense. And then in 1860, the year after the Carrington event happened, which the Carrington event was some kind of electrical storm plasma event that attacked our grid and would knock out the grid if it were to happen today. It knocked out all the radio towers.
It was
People actually,
it was a solar event. It was a sun event.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and people actually got shocked that were working at the, you know, they had the different dials for the radio. You know, you pull a pin out here, put it in
Well,
there.
not in the 1860s.
Well, they have radios. I'm not sure
In
exactly
the
how.
1860s?
Yeah.
Scientists maybe were monkeying around with some apparatus in the
Well,
1860s.
maybe it wasn't radio. It was something. There was some kind of power outage that people got shocked. They were working on different systems that they were shocked because of this.
Could you have the decade wrong?
No, it's 1859 is the Carrington event.
Very likely, sure. It was some early inventors with apparatus. I don't know the history of electricity or electronics, but my understanding is we had the telegram back then, which was an electrical wiring.
Right. The telegram. So people that were working on it,
I'm sorry, the telegraph. The telegraph.
right,
Yeah,
right.
those could easily have been shocked electrically by some solar event that reached Earth. Sure.
Yeah, and so, what I don't know what that event was, but right after that event was the seasonal flu was here every year now. And what happened about 4 to 6 years later was anxiety was a thing, and then depression became a thing, because we're electrical beings in an electrical universe. And so this electrical event that occurred, it changed the atmosphere in some way. And we were talking earlier about all the
Yeah.
wars that were happening and all this chaotic stuff that was happening,
Yeah.
and it's just been a product of chaos since this electrical surge happened in 1859. And that brings us really to where we are today. How do we heal ourselves? Is it an electrical thing that we do? Is it a spiritual thing that we do? Is it a physical thing that we do? What is Bruce's answer to where do we go from here? How do we get better?
Everybody buys my book.
That's step one.
It's absolutely step one, because in it, I do review all of this in 175 pages, and tangibly, I'm at the age where I love to talk to people like they're my sons and my daughters. I just love it. And what I will say to the planet right now, this is Father Bruce talking to the whole planet as a human being, we have to pay attention. Good night. We have to just pay attention. Did you hear me, everybody? Just pay attention to what? To everything.
Mhm.
To everything. To what's happening right here and right now. We are here. That's all we are. That's all we've ever been. That's all we'll ever be. We're going to be here. That's it. It's pre-thought. Meditation, yoga, all the Zen Buddhism, all the poets, everyone all the success coaches, all the natural healers, they want us to de-stress. And they tell us to focus on, the first thing they tell us to focus on is our breath, is our breathing. Because if we can start to control that and do that intentionally, we start to calm down. Part of the addiction of cigarettes, I've heard from a lot of smokers and from some studies, I think, was you used to light up a cigarette and you started taking deeper and slower regulated breaths. And that was it. That was
Wow, I never thought of
part of
that.
the joy of it, and the need for it. And then the additive, the nicotine, to make it addictive and profitable. So folks, that's the first thing, is to pay attention. And then the next thing is to ask oneself, why do I think what I think? And I'm talking personally, we can only recommend what works for us, is the revolution, the being born again that your dad, Bruce, experienced when challenged with the claim, we can choose our thoughts. What? Yeah, we can choose our thoughts. Completely? You tell me. I can't, not completely. They still come from somewhere, and that's what all the writers and reflectors and mystics and psychologists and poets and writers will tell you. We're a thought generating thing. David Mamet, the playwright, director, said, the mind is a raging fire, and he wrote, right, that's another tip. And maybe I'll end with that and throw the conversation wide open because I'm such a hog. But
Now,
write and journal and try and figure out, why do I think what I think? And eventually what I found was just like, I just got the habit of it, because any question you ask yourself, you can attract and devise imagination or attract, because everything's out there, all the thoughts are out there, answers. Why am I having the greatest life anyone's ever had? You ask yourself that question, you could fill notebooks with that. If you answer that question, why? How can you interpret all the situations and things in your life as, well, they're wonderful? And you could ask the question, why was I born into such a miserable life? Why do I have to have the worst parents in the world? Why did all those horrible things have to happen to me? And you can fill notebooks with that. And that's the point, is that everything is what we think it is. That's another nice button to let Todd back into his own show.
Well, yeah, that was all. I mean, that was all great. What you were saying with the paying attention, just I was looking up while you were speaking. It was the telegraph system, and if you weren't paying attention and if you weren't questioning everything, then I would have said something that was false, and I'm against saying things that are false. So you helped me by paying attention and asking questions. So, but we as a society, we look at things that when we are questioned and we want to get defensive and say, no, I'm right. No, no, no. And I wanted to look it up to make sure that the information was right. Not that I was right, because it wasn't a me versus you thing. It was, let's come together. Hold on one second.
Sure.
My dog, one of them barking. So anyway, so this goes for the audience as well, that, you want to ask questions, you want to question everything, but you got to pay attention, because anyone could be lying to you at any given time. And, how many times has a mechanic gotten over on a little old lady? Or, how many times has somebody butt in front of you in line and you just let it go because you weren't quite sure and you wanted to back off? People get taken advantage of for everything. I mean, all the time, people get taken advantage for. And we don't want to allow people to walk all over us. And all you really have to do is you look a bully in the eye and they back down. When I'm taught in school as a third, fourth, and fifth grader, don't succumb to peer pressure, stand strong on your own merit. And then I look around today and everything is peer pressure. I'm like, well, didn't you guys take Dyer class where they told us, don't fall into peer pressure, think for yourself, don't just do what the crowd's doing. I take it to that because everybody is just not paying attention, and they're afraid, and they're doing, the teacher told us to put a mask on, so we put our mask on. And I'm not judging children here. I'm saying, back to what I was saying, we're in Dare class. So what I think needs to occur is absolutely get your book, listen to my podcast, listen to Trine Day's podcast, get involved in learning things in every direction. You want to ask questions everywhere. You don't want to blindly trust information you hear. You want to cross-reference it and re-cross-reference it. And if you're getting the same information from sources that are unconnected, that are maybe across multiple disciplines, then okay, that's some trustworthy information. And once you can start, you lose all the lies and you start building a foundation of truth. I put out this meme a couple weeks ago that was like, I didn't know when I was becoming a conspiracy theorist that I'd become a spiritual person. I'd have to be a historian. I'd be into botany. I'd be into energy. That I'd be into all this different stuff. I didn't know that I had to look at X, Y, Z, blue 2 and 3 to make sure that, because I'm being lied to everywhere. So what we have to do to reclaim ourselves is to inform ourselves in every part of our lives. I have to become a mechanic to work on my own car. I have to be a landscaper to work on my own vegetables. I have to do everything for myself. I can't rely on anyone else, because given any opportunity, anyone may take advantage of me. And what their motives are doesn't matter. And, how to stop that is to just do it for myself. And then you build a community of people that are thinking this way, and then it's no longer am I doing it myself. I'm doing it with my loving wife, my loving children. This is what is happening so much in the world right now, and I see it happening in different pockets of the world. Uh, I would like to see larger communities do this. I would like to see a larger area of people because it's very hit or miss right now. You might get a bunch of people who are spiritual who live together. You might get a bunch of people who are political who live together. But, in order to have a broken down mindset of, I don't know, I want to know, and you have that type of community, that's going to be what leads us out of here, because that's when we're going to actually do science that helps humanity instead of, doing the same thing and getting the same result. We have to think outside of the box instead of being kept in this little box of, you can only work within these limits. So once we get outside the limits, that's when we become limitless.
Yeah. And you and I are like-minded and on the same wavelength. And I think about all the folks who are just quivering with fear because I can't imagine anyone who's a mainstream believer who's relaxed,
Mm-hmm.
because what they are embracing is this horrific threat. And then the threat of, well, and then if I don't do all the protocols, I'm going to lose my job. So they're just very, very threatened. And
Mm-hmm.
then they might accidentally find your show and be very, very upset by the idea that they're all wrong and they're being lied to and hurt by the people that they trust and think are doing good to them. So now, not only do they not know what to believe, but now they're in complete confusion and terror that the shot they got or this or the other thing might be harmful. So it's that immense body of fear that's out there, the immense quantity of our precious fellow human beings who are all worked up,
Mm-hmm.
who are really, really living in their head. And I feel like I'm talking about you right now a little bit, Todd. Very, very, very analytical and on guard, and you can't trust anybody. My mother used to say that, Todd. And I revert now to the Course in Miracles that says only love is real. And this little phrase, fortune cookie saying, I know where I heard it, goes like this: after the last no, there's a yes. And on that yes, the whole future of the world depends. So, Todd, I'm going to say trust. Trust
Mm-hmm.
the moment, because paying attention, and this is why I pay attention, we will see and feel what's real. At first, we'll see coincidences. And then we'll start to get the idea like, wow, there's so many coincidences that maybe there's a spiritual reality behind that. And if you keep paying attention and we keep daring to trust that we are in the embrace of a loving, infinite, and eternal spirit of love, it'll help soften everyone's heart. Even someone who's been really, really taken advantage of and doesn't trust a thing anybody says, and he's like jujitsu, like pushing back on everybody. I'm going to do it all by myself. I'm not going to let anybody else do it for me. Blah, blah, blah. I know I'm mocking you a little to make to balance for anyone who's hearing, because I know you can take it. I know you can take it, and you've got it in balance.
Mm-hmm.
To pull people to the other extreme. Don't be a sucker, especially for what your government or the media is telling you. Read my book, listen to all of Todd's podcasts, and wake up to who and what's lying out there. But as you pay attention, you're going to discover that you've got an internal radar that feels what's real. And friends, it's love. The more time we spend in nature, that's another huge one. pretend I haven't said anything for the last 45 minutes. And we started talking about solutions. The one thing I would say, as your dad, planet, is spend time in nature, because like the natives of all indigenous people, and especially the Native Americans say, nature will talk to you, because earth is your mother and the sky is your father. And we're all eternal spirits. Right here among us, Todd, are all of our ancestors, just like we've always been here. And also all of our heroes, they're here. And all of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they're here. Everything, this is quantum physics and this is metaphysics. Everything exists. Every version of everything exists and is always here. So let me riff for a minute. As you think of yourself in your worst, most traumatic event as a 5-year-old, right now, you're influencing and impacting that 5-year-old you. And if our heart is wide open and we're a fire hose of love and reassurance, we are helping that scene right there. Nothing's in concrete. This is a completely living and growing and creative realm. So, with every word, many wise people say, and I'm just going to plagiarize here, with every word, we don't describe anything as it is. We create it. So now, the next time we talk about him or her or that institution or this current event, the way we say it, sorry for yelling, creates it. So if we create it the way we just heard it on the news, we're perpetuating that version of it. If we want it in a different way, we have to think it, feel it, and give it to the universe as a new thing. And I submit that our power is infinite. I need a soapbox, right? I need my own church, right?
I think my podcast is my church. But what you're saying, abracadabra, is I create as I speak. The magic word abracadabra. So that pretty much sums it up. And I just wanted to touch, and you did a great job of bringing back the trust. So what I was saying was, be weary of man, but trust that what happens to you.
Don't be
Yeah.
tired, weary, be wary.
Yeah, be wary of man. But trust what happens to you is for your own benefit, and that if you start looking at it that you will be okay, if you trust in the spirit of yourself and that things will be okay, then they will be okay, and you just have to give it time.
We get to choose our thoughts. We can choose thoughts that delight us. We could choose to think we designed every moment of our life before we were born. Mm-hmm. So no matter what happens, great, this is showing up now. Oh, and we kept it all as a surprise. So it would be this incredible adventure where we have to overcome fear to learn how to trust whatever old author or whatever new interview guide tells us. We planned it all. We're summoning it all. And it's all a maturity test. It's all a test to see, can I love even this? Can I love even that? Can I love even this? Can I love even that? Because love is the answer. And once you discover that, you're worth listening to. You will enjoy being you every moment of your life, especially all those hours that you are alone with yourself. That's what's at stake, because we really are alone with ourselves the vast majority of our lives. Mm-hmm. And then when we get to interact with each other, if we can preach and teach love and acceptance to this spectacular degree, in my book, I tell the story of the prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp who survived. And after the war, somebody asked this old guy, how did you survive when so many others died and gave up and despaired and all this other stuff? And he said, they could beat me, they could starve me, they could make me sleep in the snow, sleep on concrete, but the guards couldn't make me stop loving them. Wow. He had mercy and compassion for the guards. He took what everyone would say the guards in a Nazi concentration camp, you can't love them. They're unlovable. He loved them. That's a miracle. He performed a miracle because it's simply how he chose to look at it, because he could choose his thoughts. Wayne Dyer is an author who passed away a few years ago, very motivational, spiritual guru, lots of books, bestsellers, lectures, PBS, said, and I bet he plagiarized it, change the way you look at things and the things you look at change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm trying to fire hose to all my kids out there. Every single thing, every tool, every trick I've imagined and journaled and wrote about and written about and read about, to just help more and more people lighten the heck up, and imagine a sense of power to join in the analysis of the lies that are killing us, so that more of us say, no, I'm not putting up with that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was a great way to end it, because all that was said has been said. This was a great conversation. I want to thank you again so much for coming back on. I want to thank you for linking me up with Ed Dodge and Paul and Liz Gould.
But now I'm going to hook you up with Sarah Whalen, who wrote Royal Vengeance, about how Diana's death was, a sacrifice orchestrated by the royal family, if I remember it correctly.
Oh yeah, I definitely am interested in that, and thank you for inviting me to the valediction roundtables. It was so informative. I can't wait till round 2. Mimi and I were both in there separately, and because I was working, she was at home, and we were both able to listen to it, and we both just learned so much. And there were so many positive, informative people involved in that I can't wait to see what round 2 holds.
And from that, and on that first roundtable, remember that guy who showed up with the beard, Ray McGovern, the ex-CIA analyst? You could probably reach out to him. I don't know him.
I did read. We communicated, but he hasn't scheduled yet. But
he's going to.
Possibly. I get a lot to the first step of people saying yes, and then I send them my scheduling app, and then they never schedule. So
then start. But look, you're just expecting that he will. You need to see as much as you can find on YouTube of his lectures, because and his just the videos of him, what he's done, and you got to get up to speed with him, because he's a big deal.
Okay. Well, yeah. I hope that he answers soon, and that we
soon after the war on terror began, he stood up at a public event where Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, was speaking, and he was questioning about what are you going to do about the fact that we now admit that there were no weapons of mass destruction, and the invasion of Iraq was really based on, if not a misconception, but lies by the American government, in an auditorium. At the mic, questions and answer after Rumsfeld talk. Ray McGovern, you gotta enjoy digging everything you can about him.
I gotta check him out. So hopefully I can get him on. But is there? Do you want people to contact me, or if they want to be in on this roundtable, do you want them to contact you, or how can they get involved in it if anyone listening is interested?
They can do a couple things. They can go to the site called valediction.net and see how to find the roundtable we're talking about. Valediction.net. People can contact me people can email me at bruce@brucedtorres.com, and definitely go to my website, brucedtorres.com, to read all the amazing reviews, Todd's included, about my book. And there's a link there to trineday.com, and buy my little book for $20. And in 175 pages, get all this empowerment plus the 40-some pages of sources in the back, so that you do not have to take my word for any of it. You can look into it for yourself.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to send me an email, any of my listeners who are familiar with my email, go ahead and I'll forward you the link. I will have all the links in the description of the websites that Bruce mentioned. So if anyone's just listening, you just pull up the description of the show notes, and you'll be able to sign up right there. Is there any final words that you want to leave the audience with, Bruce?
Yes, Todd, stay healthy, stay happy, and keep interviewing people and exploring everything.
I love it. Thank you so much for everything. And we're going to say goodbye to our audience. Goodbye, everybody. We will talk to you later.
Goodbye.